Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome back to another Eternal News video. It's finally time to catch up on the recent changes to draft packs, which also obviously majorly impact Expedition. So there's a whole bunch of like 40 plus cards that they added, and I'm gonna go over them and talk a bit about how I think they're gonna matter and impact the Expedition format. Alright, let's take a look. So first off we have Brent's Scrying, which, well, I think won't really matter since I don't think Warp is going to be a real thing. Then we have Flamefang Charmer, which is actually decent. It's mainly relevant potentially for like a mono fire deck because of a general push to support monofaction decks more in Expedition, and this is an Oni. It's a double fire and it's a pretty solid 2-drop in context of the power level of Expedition, so it's interesting for that. I don't think it's interesting anywhere else because double fire is just too much and the card is not good enough to warrant going out of your way to make this happen. This is not a constructed relevant card. I don't think this is either, honestly. Like, shift is not good enough, there's not enough shift, and this card isn't even good when there is enough shift, so I don't think it's relevant. Scattershot, I mean, Yetis are not a thing in Expedition, Herald is not an Expedition, so I don't think there's anything relevant to be done with this. Correct me if I'm wrong and missing something here. Factory Quota is a pretty nice aggressive tool, could even be like a main deckable card in something like a mono fire deck. Definitely an interesting tool to exist. Then again, life gain, health gain doesn't seem that big of a thing in Expeditions, so ultimately not sure if it's gonna matter enough. It's still a good tool against like control decks in general, so if control is becoming more of a thing, which is very possible with some of the cards added, this could be an interesting market option to fight them more. And then we have Godan. They added the whole cycle. Godan is one of the more relevant ones because she's pretty powerful. First of all, 5/5 charge is super good, and if she's unanswered, she just runs away with the game in terms of card advantage. So if mono fire is a thing, it's gonna be because of this card. I don't think, however, the card is supportable outside of mono decks, simply because it's a proactive card and also because we only have 8 duels, and that really makes it hard to run this in anything other than a monofaction deck. Then we have the time cards. Phase Out. This is a pretty nice tool, definitely a great tool for Combre aggro, and Combre aggro already got a couple of decent options from the adventures, so would definitely revisit aggressive Combre with Phase Out. Phase Out is obviously also a really cool card for Elysian, especially when people are more prepared for Permafrost. Just overall a very interesting tool to have for proactive time decks in the format. Pack Beast seems like a pretty decent option, especially if you don't want to like run your Trailmaker into Var's Favor type stuff, but still want to get ramp and get the ramp permanently. This is an interesting option. It's obviously worse in the sense that it doesn't fix and you need actual power, so it doesn't like generate a power on its own, but it's also doesn't give the opponent counterplay for your acceleration, so it's definitely a card to keep in mind, even though more of a like marginal role player. Yeah, this is not a relevant constructed card, I think, even with shift synergies. Then we have Expedition Leader. Once again, I don't think shift is enough of a thing for this to matter. It's technically powerful, but it's also very fragile in a world full of Varus favors, and also, yeah, it needs to be around for at least one turn cycle to even do anything, so the opponent has plenty of time to deal with it. Then we have Trickster Mage, bit more shift warp support type stuff. Don't think it's gonna be relevant though. A really nice market option here for time decks, especially against like drift decks and other flying nonsense. Then we have Shimokan, one of the weaker options, I think. I just don't think that there's enough payoff to be mono, to even attempt to be mono time, or a time heavy enough deck to support this, so I don't think this is going to be relevant to the top tier decks in any way. Then we have Justice, Flash Grenade, not a constructed relevant card. Spell Strike, Sorceress, also too weak for constructed, I think. Taurite Test Pilot, another like limited only card. Defiance, however, is a pretty big addition. Sure, it got nerfed recently, so it's a lot less good, but it's still pretty good for what it does in Expedition, and will make control more of an option, be it TJP or JPS type stuff, for example, or even like Zoltar with the Zoltar Arcanum. There are a couple of good options here. JPS has some interesting card draw engine with choice and wanted poster, but it lacks the sweeper, but Defiance definitely is even more valuable then. Then we have Vanquish, also recently nerfed, but pretty decent. It's not as good as it is in Throne, or was in Throne, simply because the overall power level is lower. That means more units that don't hit the threshold, like less 3-drops that you can vanquish than in Throne, for example, and even 4-drops that you can't vanquish, like in Canis and stuff like that. So the card is a bit of a mixed bag, but it's definitely a strong option to exist for those colors, either as a main deck option or at least as a good market card. Blade Maker is amazing. This is like the premium 4-drop that Justice wanted, basically, and Justice didn't really have a good 4-drop, and now there's a mono Justice super powerful 4-drop. This card is a staple. We'll have to see how Justice shakes out, if there's decks that want the card, but in terms of decks that want a 4-drop like this card is amazing. And yeah, mono Justice seems like one of the top 2 mono faction options in the format, with Baby Icaria having been added, which seemed pretty bad before this change, but now with this change is actually pretty great. It lets you turn 4 CDT, it buffs CDT, it is a great onslaught enabler for CDT. Mono Justice means it's actually a really good unit. It still suffers a bit from the Varus favor issue that I mentioned, but the payoff is at least really high if it doesn't die. And also if you run enough 2-drops, you can sometimes just play it on 5 against like shadow decks that have favor. And yeah, I mean, CDT is pretty powerful. Since his nerf, he isn't as powerful and dominant anymore, but he's still a 6/6 flying warp for 5 with a potential upside, so he's still a super strong payoff, especially in a lower power level format like Expedition. Then we have Primal. I don't think Dragon Breath is gonna be a real card. Static Bolt is a pretty exciting addition with the existence of Prodigious Sorcery, and just overall adding a bit more burn for like the spell damage sorcery type deck. So yeah, this is gonna be a pretty cool one. Not sure how good it's gonna be in the end, but definitely interesting and pretty cool. Slope Sergeant, some more like marginal Yeti stuff that I don't think is gonna matter in Expedition. Eileen's Intervention is a pretty cool one, especially with cards like Vanquish costing 3 now, so might be a situationally interesting option, either as a market card or even as a main deck card, if the metagame has enough 3-cost cards to counter with this and enough flyers to kill. The Yeti part likely seems pretty irrelevant. Yotun Punter, more like draft-aimed Yeti stuff, basically. Scouting Party is pretty great and pretty interesting for Expedition also. Not sure what a deck would look like with it. You could go into like an illusion direction with Shard, and just kind of like an old school style, more mid-rangey quality illusion deck. So there are definitely a couple of interesting options here. It's even interesting in a control shell potentially. Then we have Rust. Rust's very powerful, especially in a format like this where there's a lot less free roll silences like Enforcers and so on. But I just don't think that monoprimal or that primal heavy is remotely realistic. So unfortunately, I think the card's pretty unplayable. And we have Muck Crawler, some more shift support, which I don't think is good enough for Expedition. This is actually a pretty solid 2-drop and an interesting option for Mono Shadow, although there are probably too many better options with Rip Knife and Nightshade and so on. So ultimately more of a draft card. Yeah, this is bad. This is pretty great, simply because a 3-cost removal with the limitations that this has is pretty strong overall, given the removal situation in the format, and you can play the 3-cost 3/3 shift 1 that I think it's called Eligide. That's scouts when you summon it, and that alone is already a pretty nice 2-card package. Just 2 very solid cards on their own that get a bit better together. Shifting on 1 and then on 3 killing something and turning it into a 5/3. So it comes out as a 5/3 unblockable on turn 4, which is pretty sweet. So yeah, the black removal suit is looking pretty powerful for mono shadow and similar stuff. It's also a lot better in 2-faction decks technically than Devouring Shadow because it's less dependent on being super shadow heavy. I don't think this card is relevant. Same with Zangua probably. I don't think any like aggro type deck that could support this would be good enough, so I don't think this is gonna matter. And then we have Tazbu, which is arguably the most powerful of the 5 cards that we got. And Shadow has the most payoff, I think, between Devouring Shadow, Marionette Cross, and just overall having a pretty coherent sort of good stuff, proactive mid-range type deck. So yeah, Mono Shadow looks like the most promising one, followed by Mono Justice, followed by Mono Fire, and I already started trying them a bit on my stream yesterday, so you can check that out in the VODs if you want to. And then we got all 5 displays. They are a lot less good in this format than in Throne, obviously, because 3-faction is a lot weaker, the power bases are worse, but especially the Yennev display and the Winchest display are still super powerful cards and worth exploring, even though these color combinations are not the go-to 3-faction color combinations in Expedition currently, which is partially why I think they added them, because if they would already be good tri-faction combinations, they would potentially become problematic, but so they create interesting incentives. And yeah, I'm pretty skeptical of this. I don't think the color combination plays very well in the format, and some of the modes also don't make much sense, so not sure if this is going to be relevant. This has just always been bad, and I don't think there's much of a difference here. Like, sure, there's technically a potential control deck in these colors, but it doesn't even look good in that deck. And then we have Display of Honor, which is in a weird color combination for the format, I think, and also a bit too proactive for how a tri-faction deck is going to play in that format. Alright, all in all, pretty big shakeups, big push into mono-faction, and some pretty interesting tools. So you can watch me daily on my stream trying to figure out what this all means and what the new good decks are in this pretty shaken up Expedition between the new recently added campaigns and all these cards. So yeah, and of course let me know in the comments what you think of these assessments and how you feel about them, and if there's something that I miss or that you think is wrong or something. Alright, so as usual, if you enjoy the content, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel for more, turn on the notification icon so you don't miss out on future content. And yeah, if you want to support me and other content creators, please consider whitelisting YouTube on your ad block, or just turn off your ad block for YouTube entirely. That's a pretty great way to help us content creators creating free content for you guys without costing you anything other than a little bit of your time. Alright, that's gonna be it again for this time. Sorry about that. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll be back soon with more content. I'll see you next time.